Today, we have the pleasure of welcoming Rena Whittaker to Hiring for Good. Rena is a powerhouse in corporate and nonprofit leadership with over 2 decades of experience driving impactful change in healthcare philanthropy and organizational development. As the founder and president of BeingTribal, she's a sought-after keynote speaker, author, and expert in cultivating personal and professional transformation through her tribal leadership framework. Rena has led multi-million-dollar fundraising initiatives, served as executive director for major healthcare foundations, and advised organizations on rebuilding high-performing teams with trust, respect, and accountability at their core. Her passion for bringing people together, combined with her expertise in leadership and philanthropy, makes her an inspiring force for change. Rena, welcome.
Thank you so much, Tanis. I'm going to take you on the road with me after that introduction.
Well, it's easy to write about interesting people doing amazing work. Suzanne and I are really excited to have you as our guest. I think, when we start our interviews, we always ask our guests to just kind of discuss how they got where they are today, and kind of the journey that they took. So if you don't mind, we'd love to hear a little bit about your background.
Yes, I had the pleasure of serving at urban and rural foundations for about 24 years. And while I was at Legacy, and I'd been coaching women and men individually for about, I would say, 12 years solid. I wasn't getting paid for it. It was just part of my community building work because I loved building coalitions. And in that time, I decided I was going to write a book around the success of being the best leader you possibly could be. And what I learned in listening through all those years of coaching and looking at client success was you really need to have a team of folks that are rooting you on, that kept you out of your top 40 playlist of what I'm not in your head, and reminded you of what your divine gifts are and what you're supposed to be doing in your life. And so I started documenting, what does a tribe look like? And my family is Chinook Indian and Italian. So I was going back to my Chinook Indian roots about what tribal means. And then looking at my family, the generations of families, of how families are tribes, since your first tribe that you have, and starting to think about what does it mean to be tribal and what is success in tribal. And so while I was at my career at Legacy, where I finished up the last 10 years of fundraising, I had this voice in my head, just write it, just write it, just write it. So I finally wrote my book. I had to really become vulnerable in that process, which was scary, and we may talk about that today. And after I wrote it and launched it, and I was actually doing this work of being tribal and speaking to groups, is when I heard the voice in the midst of the pandemic, just leave. Just leave, do your business, do your business. So I really launched BeingTribal as my business in 2019 and fully left my career in 2020.
Wow.
What a leap of faith. And you talked about that vulnerability and formative learnings. I would like to hear more about that because it's hard to really open up and show who you are. So
one of the things I just started to do in my keynote was ask what 3 words would be impactful for you to really take that leap of faith. And it isn't what you might think. It isn't believe in yourself or something like that. My 3 words are buck ass naked.
Ooh.
And I know that sounds like, what kind of podcast is this going to be with this woman, Rena? While I was writing my book, I met with one of my very good friends, went to high school with Brian Hilliard, who's married to Ariel Ford, a really well-known author. They both did some publicity work with Deepak Chopra. They've been in the book business for a long time. And she went to high school with Brian. And she actually said, hey, I really want you to read Rena's book. By that time, it was kind of a workbook. And I thought I was really onto something. And so she sent it down to him. And he said, I'm really interested about this tribal thing, but I want to know more about Rena. And at that time, I didn't talk about myself in the book. I talked about I had a hard childhood in a loving family, but a really hard childhood. And I wasn't going to say anything else. So we got on Skype, dating myself, got on Skype, and Brian said, I really want to know about you, Rena. I really want to know what happened to you. If you're asking these folks to be vulnerable and really live into their true calling, that God's calling them to be, their divine gifts, all those things, you have to be vulnerable first. And I said, well, I'm not going to do that. He said, well, I'm asking you to be emotionally naked and tell your story. And I said, I'm not going to do that. I'm not going to tell my story. And he said, well, then don't write the book.
Wow.
And so I was a little angry with him. And he kept on saying, what's your story? What's your story? And so finally I said, and I raised millions of dollars from high net folks who wanted to make a difference in the world. And I was afraid of what people would think. And I was afraid of what my family and my children especially would think.
Not everyone in your life knew all of your backstory or things.
My sisters knew and my parents knew. I told them when I was 21. No one else knew.
Wow.
I kept that secret because I felt somehow responsible for what happened. So as Brian's kind of pressing me, what happened, I said, fine, you want to know what happened? When between the ages of 3 and 6 years old, my family friend molested me and traded me to other men for sex. And I didn't tell anyone because I felt rotted out inside. And there were so many times growing up that I just wanted to end my life and kill myself. And God kept on entering my life. And now I understand that we all have divine gifts. And I love who I am today, but that's no one's business. Because what I was really thinking is there's no way I'm going to tell my children who were in college and high school what happened, because for some reason I thought it was going to shame them.
So funny how we project on, it's our insecurities projecting onto our kids.
So
Yeah.
we sat across the dining room table that I still own today, my son being 6'2" and about 260, and my daughter being a high school senior. And I held their hands across the table and said, I'm going to share with you something that might embarrass you, but I'm going to put it in the book. This man who I respect a lot told me to get emotionally naked, and I'm not asking permission about you letting me put it in the book. I'm just saying I'm going to do it. And so I gave them a very high level. I'm holding hands with them. My son's at one end of the table and my daughter's across from me, and I'm holding their hands and I tell them what happened. And I'm crying. I can barely get the words out. And my daughter is crying because they don't know this about me. And my son is crying. And with his big, powerful hands, he puts it on all of our hands and says, Mom, get buck ass naked because you may save someone's life. And that allowed me the freedom to be able to say, I'm going to be who I am. And I'm going to tell my story at the beginning of the book because I want everyone to know that no matter what happens in your life, no matter where you come from, no matter what you experienced, you are divinely created and you have these amazing gifts to shine your light onto the world. Our responsibility is to shine our light and share our gifts and change the world. And so that is what I truly believe about being tribal. It doesn't matter where you came from. It matters what you're going to do about it right now in this life.
As a nonprofit leader, you're also kind of working in the community. So there's, how do you operationalize values in those two frameworks, I guess?
Thank you. The framework of being tribal begins with trust. Trust is the foundation of it. So tribal is an acronym.
Yeah.
Trust, respect, investment, belonging, accountability, and leadership. It's kind of an upward spiral. What I learned not only building coalitions and communities when I was working at rural foundations, in relationships with other leaders, and in my own life, if you do not have trust in your team, right? If you don't have self-trust, do what you say you're going to do, have communicated expectations, show up and be vulnerable. And this is a new process we're going to bring into the organization, and we don't quite know how to do it, but we're going to do it collaboratively, telling the truth. All those things are very important in building trust, right? How do you feel about self-trust, and how do you build trust in your organization? It doesn't matter how fantastic your organization is or what widgets you produce. If you do not have trust in your team is not going to feel safe. And being safe in a work environment is critically important to our success. And above that trust is respect. I always kind of talk about it being like the 12 days of Christmas, right? You have to stack upon each other. Respect is all about boundaries. It's about communicated expectations. For instance, if you have an organization that operates between like 9 a.m. and 5 p.m., you may say emails before 7 a.m. or after 7 p.m. are not allowed. Or we don't send emails over the weekend. This boundaries is about how we communicate, the type of words we use, and the kindness we exude, as well as the time frame, and as well as how we hold what we will allow and not allow in our work environment. Because what you permit, you promote, right? So team agreements, things like that, those kinds of processes that I use as a framework in respect. Investment is something that I remind leaders before they come into work and with their teams. What you read, what you listen to, and what you watch inform how your day is going to look like and feel like. What you share with your team, are you investing in instructional videos or play days? Right? Where you have your team do vision boards or they go and volunteer at someone else's organization. How are you investing in that time? How are you investing in perks for employees? How are you investing in health benefits? How are you so it really is not only getting your own vibe right as a leader and making sure that you're investing in yourself to show up in your very best self at work, prayer, meditation, journaling, all those things that center yourself before, because the energy from which you create informs the energy of what you create, right? It's really important. And then belonging, which is what I'm talking a lot about this year, is how do you create this know me, care for me, and ease my way mentality? Like know your team and care for them. Understand who they are. How do you not only have self-belonging and being really self-acceptant of our bodies, our minds, our gifts. Women are really hard on ourselves about this. But how do you create belonging in the team? How do you say, I want to know more about you? Like, what makes you light up in life? Knowing folks' stories and having this woven fabric of celebration about the things you're accomplishing. Accountability, I love to work in 90-day plans, and I have a whole framework that I speak to teams about. Like, let's look at, instead of planning a whole year out, and I learned this in healthcare, how do you know what your big goals are, and how are you going to focus at them, not only one day at a time, 1 week at a time, 1 month at a time, but a 90-day plan. And then leadership is recognizing what your divine gifts are, your divine calling is, and how you implement them, to have joy in the work you do, to have ease and grace in the work you do, and amplify the rest of your team's gifts as well. So that's leadership. That's kind of the tribal framework that I work within. And then I break it down. Some teams I work with, they just want to focus on trust and respect because their team has gone through big changes. And other teams are high-performing teams, but they want to focus on investment and accountability and leadership. So it depends on plug and play, what a team needs, and what I think is going to raise the energy of a team and create this really wonderful group of leaders who see each other, who recognize, care for each other, and are holding each other in a way. Because work is hard. We've learned that if we don't have each other in a work environment, because we're with each other so much, if we don't recognize each other and are kind and compassionate and empathetic, then the work that we do doesn't fulfill the need of the employees. And then you have folks that are leaving an organization, you don't have high retention.
And you mentioned something, and I just want to kind of dig down a little bit. Belonging. Mm-hmm. You said you're doing a lot on belonging today.
Yeah.
Why do you think that is?
It's a funny thing about separating human beings, right? We need each other. And during the pandemic, what did we do? We separated from each other. Families didn't see each other. Our team members were on Zoom. And a lot of folks have kept virtual teams instead of coming back together for a variety of different reasons. Creating a sense of belonging is so important because, first of all, we have to believe that we're part of something bigger than ourselves. We have to believe that we can be owners of a mission and owners of a tribe, so to speak, owners of a team, and that even if we disagree, right? There's been a lot of that. Phone calls. Rena, our team meeting just exploded because someone was talking about politics, and now we have team members not speaking to each other. Belonging is so critical because it's what we have in common and what are we doing together to fulfill the mission, and how is that mission actually creating a sense of belonging for ourselves, that we're part of something bigger than that. There's a great book out there called Dream Manager, and if you haven't read it, I highly recommend it. It's about knowing what your team's dreams are and how you can help them fulfill it. It's several years old. I think it's like 10 or 15 years old, but it's a great book. Belonging is critical. That's part of retention. I know folks that have left their companies to make less money because they want to have a sense of belonging someplace else. That's, yeah.
How do you, so just curious, like, how do you operationalize belonging?
Yeah.
You know, what tools do you give the companies that you're counseling, or what have you implemented in your own roles as a leader to create that feeling?
Yeah. I encourage organizations to do group activities, right? Like, for instance, there is an insurance company that I work with, and they have offices in seven different cities. But they gather together once a year, and they do at an outside eatery, and they just spend time eating together. Another organization has offices across the state, will gather together and all volunteer for another organization. They do vision board parties together. They encourage small group gatherings of folks that live in the same city. This is also important for nonprofit boards. When I was leading at Legacy, I would always encourage my board members I would assign them to 2 or 3 different new board members or current board members to gather for coffee and talk about what's going on as a board leader and what do they want the foundation to focus on, like a small group meeting, but it's just spending time with each other. And how are you doing? How's your day going? What's going on in your life? How's your children? How is your, do you have any big trips planned? Just getting to know each other. We think productivity is the key to success, especially in this country. And what is really key is you can be a high producer, but if you don't feel like you're part of a team, or if you feel like no one knows who you are, then that's going to destroy the fabric of your organization. So gathering together, having fun, being joyful. So I have a list of different events that they can do or gathering, and I ask them, sit down with your teams. Have you asked them what they want to do or what would be something fun to do together or be of service together?
I love that. And so kind of taking a step back, it makes me want to ask about characteristics. When you've hired, how did you build your teams, and were there any like characteristics specifically you looked for in individuals? And if there were, why?
Well, I love CVI. I don't know if you've heard of Core Value Index, right? There's a couple other personality indexes that I have looked at, but really, I know this is going to sound kind of silly. It's really about the vibe of someone. Right? Does my energy recognize your energy? Because technically, unless you're a surgeon or you're performing some, or an architect or an engineer, right? You don't want the building to fall down. It really is about fit. Do we have the same, let me put it this way. Have you ever been around individuals who just give you energy? Like you're talking to them and you're exchanging ideas and you feel like, oh, my cup is full, right? And at the same time, have you been around individuals that just take your energy?
Yeah.
Right? Nervous Nelly, very upset, very frustrated. Everything's negative. Playing the devil's advocate over and over and over too much. It's great to be critical, or be analytical. I think that's just as important as recognizing what your core values are. Like on my website, there's downloadables, and I have one called a core values exercise, and you figure out what are your core values as a leader. What are the core values of your team? What do you have in common? You can have folks that have different political backgrounds and different faith backgrounds, right? But if you have similar core values, that's the fabric, that is the magnetism that draws you together and creates that common ground that's so critical.
Yeah, you're speaking our language.
Very much so.
I would say, we talk so much about fit in what we do because skills you can teach. It's that alignment of goals and values that really, when it's aligned, it's amazing what teams can do.
And how many teams really spend time identifying not only the leader's core values, but the team's core values. How many of them do that? Because we can all have different personality traits. We can be introverts and extroverts and all the ESTJ, whatever they are, right? But the core values is really our humanity. And that's key to our success.
We talk about these lived experiences, right? And you've had incredible lived experiences and you've overcome them. And even that has shaped who you are today. And I think recognizing that and being aware of, yes, this horrible thing happened, but it really on who you are today. And it's pretty, again, inspiring and inspirational. And I'm just going to say, buck-ass naked.
Thank you. The universe, God, whatever you believe in, gives you opportunities to connect your past to your future. So when I first started out in fundraising, my first campaign that I had to kind of lean into was for the Children's Center of Clackamas County. I had to raise money from donors and talk about child abuse. That wasn't my plan. No one knew my history, but the universe gave me an opportunity to step into that. And I got to sit at a table. This is healing. I got to sit at a table with individuals who didn't know my history, both men and women who shared about the soccer coach who molested them, and that's why they're making a gift, or the uncle who molested them. And I just sat and held space for them, right? They had no idea that they were healing me, because I was not alone. So the universe gives you opportunities to step into the future, to not only take your wisdom and gifts to propel a mission forward, and we also take this thermometer that we say, her experience was harder than my experience, or his experience was harder than my experience, right? No, your greatest joy, your greatest moment in your life is the same as my greatest moment in my life. Your worst moment in your life was the same as my worst moment in my life. Yeah. We're human beings, and we're divinely created with such complex opportunities to rise and fall. And we just have to make the choice because the universe, God, they're rooting for you.
When you were in your first professional role, and here you were sitting at a table with survivors of child abuse, did you recognize at that moment that this was an opportunity for healing? Or were you kind of like, how in the world is this happening? And later you how did that work in your brain?
I'm going to go back a step further. To be a successful fundraiser for this campaign, because my boss had just left and they were looking for a new boss for me, I had to go sit with a gentleman, Kevin Dowling, who ran Cares Northwest for 28 years. And he's now working for the, I think, a federal policy around child abuse. Amazing man, Kevin Dowling, if you're listening, I adore you. Oh my gosh, praise him. I had to go to Cares Northwest behind a glass window, right, and watch an interview of a child who had been molested, because Cares Northwest is this multidisciplinary interview, so children don't have to go on a stand and tell their story over and over again, right? So, and they were doing a swab of a child because they had strep throat. And I was asking, are the child sick? And they said, no, they're looking for semen samples in this little boy's throat. And so that was the moment that I went outside after that. I had to step away. I went out to my car and sat and screamed a little bit and said, God, why are you putting me in this position? And I kind of felt that you're not alone. You're not alone. You're not alone. And so I had already had that mindset of when I was talking to these very successful adults who could give big gifts, right? Watching them become little children in front of me. sharing their story and thinking, oh, this is how healing happens, that we're all the same.
Wow.
That's powerful. And again, I think both Tanis and I are like tearing up.
Yeah.
I mean, that is because somewhere we've seen it ourselves. And whether it's personally or somebody we've known, it is. And I think it's amazing. We've been doing Hiring for Good podcast for a year. And for women, CEOs, strong leaders in our communities have talked about either sexual abuse or physical abuse. And it's more prevalent than I think people realize, because they look at you and you go, good God, Rena has her shit together. She is, you're doing national speaking, you have a book, you have a very successful consulting practice. It's more prevalent than people realize.
It's very prevalent for men as well, but they don't speak out about it as much. And I'm hoping that's going to change. And we are all the same. Like, we are all human beings just trying to survive and find our way forward. And I believe that my soul chose this life. I chose my parents. I chose my alcoholic father. I chose all of it. Who's turning 88 today, by the way. I adore him. He's got like 48 years clean and sober. I chose this life. I chose to walk through what I experienced so I could do the work on the back end.
Right.
And it gave me more compassion, because I could be as, look at me, I've got my stuff together. And then I have to humble myself and say, oh, girl, remember that time when you thought, if I could just drive into this boulder when I was 17, I could make everyone's life a lot better. So I have to be super humble and realize that we are all human beings. We're all the same. Doesn't matter what we look like on the outside. We are all a child becoming an adult, trying to make a difference in the world.
What advice would you give to your 20-year-old self?
Boy, that was a hard year. I was in college. I was the first girl to go to college in my family. My mom didn't know what had happened at that point in time. I didn't tell them until I was 21 and out of school. And she worked for the city of Wilsonville, and she bought me a cassette tape from Jack Canfield called Self-Esteem and Peak Performance. It was I'm trying to think of the name of the conference, but he spoke all over the country, and I got to meet him and talk about my story, which was really lovely. But I was at 20 I actually broke the cassette tapes because I listened to them over and over and over again. That was when light started to enter my life. What I would say to myself is, no one's going to care or think bad of you for what happened to you as a child. And even though you were told as a very little girl, that I did it, right? This is my fault. And everyone's going to leave you if they find out what you did, right? My perpetrator's telling me this. No one's going to care. No one's going to care. We think that we're going to get judged or people are going to judge us. And I wish I would have known back then that I could be bolder, that I didn't have to be so afraid all the time. Yeah.
Do you today still fight that fear?
Not as much as I used to. I mean, my husband and I have a blended family. I have 6 adult children and 11 grandchildren.
Wow.
So I got off the plane from Virginia, came home. My daughter and her husband, soon-to-be husband, picked me up, and I got to play with my almost 6-month-old grandson, right? Which always redeems me. There are times I have self-doubt. I'm still building my business. I'm not a multimillionaire. I am hustling still. I'm still building my business. I get to work with amazing nonprofits like The Contingent, who are recruiting foster families and recruiting, which is why I do it, recruiting children who are often in really bad situations. So I feel like that's part of my golden thread of giving back. But of course I have self-doubt. Of course I think, who am I? Of course I do, right? Yeah. Who am I? And then I pray and I meditate and I hear the voice, this is what you're meant to do. Don't doubt me. Don't doubt me. Rena, don't doubt me. This is what you're meant to do. Just keep going. It's going to be okay. Trust me.
That's amazing.
That is.
So, I was going to finish up and just say, this podcast is called Hiring for Good. And it has a lot of different meaning to different people. So what does it mean to you?
As a leader who had amazing teams of women and men, hiring for good, the good means really creating a culture of empowerment and advancement without competition on your teams in this world. And it's being a ladder placer, not a ladder puller, especially for women, right? Sometimes there's one seat at the table and they get there and they don't want, they're the only woman at the table. So I think whether we're men or women, we need to be a ladder placer to elevate young folks on up to new careers, not a ladder puller, right? Our time in leadership is finite. And it's important for us to be the best leader we possibly can and hire the best leaders we possibly can and build this resilience and belonging in our teams to create this retention in the future leaders of the organization. Like, what's your succession plan? And I think that's part of it. I think that's part of it when I think hiring for good.
I don't think it could be said any better. What a gift to have you with us. Thank you so much, Rena. Truly, you were talking at one point in our interview about being around people who give you energy. And I was like, I'm experiencing it right now. I was like, yes. Anyway, so thank you very much.
Thank you so much for sharing and showing your vulnerability. That takes a lot of brave actions.
It's a new muscle I am exercising. I wrote it in the book, but when you get in front of a stage in front of a bunch of people and you tell your story, it's a little different, right? Because you don't want to offend anyone. And saying buck ass naked is kind of cussing, especially if it's a conservative group. However, I just want to thank you for giving me this time. I want to thank you for listening to me. And I hope that anyone who's listening who has ever felt like they are not worthy or their past has shadowed them, that my grandmother used to say, there's a reason why the windshield is bigger than the rearview mirror. Shine your light, share your gifts, and change the world because we need you. So thank you.
Love it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks for joining us today at Hiring for Good. If you were inspired by our conversation, don't forget to like, follow, and subscribe wherever you get your podcasts.
And if you want to learn more about our executive search services, check us out at www.hiringforgood.net or our company website, Acumen Executive Search.
Thanks so much, and don't forget to join us next time for another in-depth conversation about transformational leadership. Until then, have fun.